Floater here. This is my second time doing this video because I screwed up with the audio, but we won't talk about that. This video is going to be about the G.I. Joe Classified line. You probably already see it in the thumbnail or title, and talking about why this line, in my opinion, has been so successful this year, has been so good, and has been one of the best action figure lines of 2022. And I'll just be honest with you, and honest with all y'all who ever come to watch this video. I don't know much about G.I. Joe for the most part. My knowledge mainly stems from the cartoon that I barely watched. I watched some reruns when I was a lot younger. I watched those old G.I. Joe movies with The Rock in it, though it was a long time ago the last time I watched it. And I watched that old G.I. Joe cartoon that was on the Hub, which is actually a really good cartoon for what I remember. I think G.I. Joe Rogue or G.I. Joe Renegades. I don't really remember. But like, I don't know much about G.I. Joe, but every time I see the figures online, or I decide to get one myself, it's a really good figure. So probably I would say some of the best figures I always see in my collection at the retail level. Just to be specific, at the retail level is some of the best figures I consistently see, no matter what. And you know, every reviewer really says the same thing when you see these figures. They're extremely consistent. The G.I. Joe team is extremely consistent and knows mostly what the fans want when it comes out of these figures. Let's talk about other lines and what G.I. Joe does right compared to other lines. Articulation. It doesn't matter what character it is. It could be a female character as well. The articulation, which I have a few female G.I. Joe characters I have in pre-order. I'm excited, but it could be any type of character. It could be a mob character or a henchman of some sort, and the articulation is great. Double jointed elbows and knees. I can't show you right now, but looking at these figures, you can see it. Double jointed elbows and knees, butterfly joints. There's always swivels, a swivel in the thigh, a swivel in the boot usually as well. I hate it because Marvel Legends, sometimes they don't even do that. They won't put a swivel in the boot. You should always include it, no matter what, in my opinion. Unless it looks very, very weird, there's no point in not including it. Or a swivel in the bicep as well. They always include those basic things. And now they put ball joints in the neck as well. A ball joint in the neck and the head, which is some stuff only imported figures do. Stuff that Mafex and SH Figure Arts and the more high chain stuff usually do with their figures. But G.I. Joe does that as well. Actually, a third one, they put a ball joint in near the waist region, which adds for a lot of extra articulation. That's something I've never seen actually, from mainly from retail figures. No retail line that I know of does that. They don't put a ball joint in the waist. That's honestly amazing, and it does give you a little bit more articulation you wouldn't expect, especially from guys that are usually, you know, having a bunch of knives, pistols, backpacks on them, carrying a lot of stuff. For the most part, you can still get a lot of articulation out of them compared to other figure lines that really doesn't have that excuse, and they're still somewhat struggling. And they also have drop legs. Oh, I don't know the proper way to say it. They have a drop leg function in the waist as well, which again gives you a little bit more articulation. You get so much in these figures. It's so much life in them. It's great. The detail, the articulation. A closer look at Sergeant Stalker right here looks great. And the accessories, compared to, like, I keep comparing them, but Marvel Legends, they give you a lot of accessories. Now, I'm not saying G.I. Joe is perfect. I'm not saying they're perfect. They're, even at their price point, which they are going up, you still kind of want a bit more. Not saying Marvel Legends gives you, like, Marvel Legends, they don't give you enough at all. Same thing applies to G.I. Joe, except they still give more than other lines. Not saying this is still not enough. I think the problem with G.I. Joe Classified is that they don't give enough head sculpt sometimes, or even any type of extra hands. But compared to other lines and the amount of weapons they will give you sometimes, it's a breath of fresh air to see that they somewhat care. So you know, I'm still happy with it, but it could be better. But overall, they're better than most other lines I see, and that's including McFarlane and maybe even some other lines. Maybe Storm Collectibles. I'm not sure about them. I don't know enough about them. Y'all in the comments can tell me, but if you want to. But overall, that's just my opinion on the G.I. Joe classified line. Like, oh man, look at this Storm Shadow here. This Storm Shadow here was the main reason why I started, you know, this year to go ahead and collect some G.I. Joe figures, because this Storm Shadow looked good, and I see a lot of love on G.I. Joes on Instagram, a lot of love, man, and it's hard not to like look like, man, they're posed so well on there, and just on any platform, it makes it just makes it hard not to get. But these are good figures, including this Storm Shadow, including these Red Ninjas. And another interesting fact is the fact that the treatment of their, you know, more build your army figures, I've never seen it. Like Marvel Legends, they do a decent job, but usually they get an old mold and they just put some old stuff over it, and usually that old mold is a very, very old, outdated mold that isn't really, you know, what anyone would want, but it's a Build-A-Figure, so no one really cares nor, you know, asks for more. It does the job, even if the figure itself isn't all that great. G.I. Joe, they use the Snake Eyes mold. The Snake Eyes mold, like the Reddit, yeah, it's Snake Eyes but with a bunch of stuff on top, which is a great articulated mold, a very posable mold. And imagine building your army off of an amazing mold, unlike Marvel Legends, who usually uses whatever they have from like 10 years ago and call it a day. That, again, that's some care, and you would never know that's Snake Eyes. You would never know. Now overall, you know, I asked a question on my community tab, which lines are better, and it was between Valorverse and G.I. Joe. And a lot of people may say still that G.I. Joe is the line of the year. Now I'm not gonna like put an argument, because I barely have any Valorverse. I got my first Valorverse figure just a few weeks ago. I just haven't opened it until now. I just kind of forgot about it, but it's really good. But I'm not going to say much, because again, me having one figure does not give me a whole idea of the whole line. So for the most part, yeah, I'm going to assume G.I. Joe is the better line at the moment, until I see a video saying otherwise. But like, I don't blame people saying like this is the line of the year. And if we're going to compare it again to Marvel Legends, not just the figures, like we already gotten the idea out of the way that consistently G.I. Joe puts out better figures almost 9 times out of 10 compared to Marvel Legends, where you may get a wave of 5 to 6 figures and only 2 figures are worth getting, and the others, there's maybe a few others that you want to get to fill out a team, but they aren't the greatest. You may be lucky if you have 4 figures out of like 6 or 7 be actually good. It should be every figure, in my opinion. It should be every figure worth getting, not just half of them or less than half. It's just kind of disappointing. But at the same time, Marvel Legends, they released about 4 times the amount of figures than G.I. Joe does, so maybe that's the benefit in G.I. Joe's favor. But if that's the case, that's tough. That's tough, because that's mean we only know good stuff from this line, not any half-ass stuff. So you know, it is what it is. But the biggest problem with the G.I. Joe line, which I could probably see it maybe not being the line of the year for some, is the fact that it's what's the word? I can't figure out. But basically Hasbro does a terrible job of making these figures available for anyone, or really for everyone. A lot of times, from what I've heard from most people, they have to end up going online at most, I can't talk. They have to rely on going online to buy these figures most of the times, instead of, you know, going into your store and finding them, which I can already feel the sentiment, because a lot of times I don't find these guys at all. There's only been a few rare moments where I go to a niche store you know, a store that wasn't Target or Walmart, a little toy store or a little, you know, comic book store that I know of that actually had these figures and had newer figures. I don't like ordering stuff online. I may be, you know, weird. I may have people agree with me, but I'd rather buy figures in stores, one, because they're getting more expensive, so I don't want to spend an extra $10 to have this guy shipped out, you know what I mean? If I can find it in stores, there we go. I buy majority of my figures in stores anyway, so it is kind of, you know, annoying that Hasbro does a terrible job, you know, making these figures available. It's why, you know, Valorverse is a good example of a company that actually actively tries to do better. Granted, you still can find Valorverse figures in stores mainly. You usually find them in little, again, niche stores, little toy, you know, stores in weird parts of your town, or a comic book store. That's where you're gonna usually find them, by actual store owners who like these figures as well and buys them, not Walmart and Target. Now they are spreading, those Valorverse figures are getting around, so they're actively becoming more and more available, while G.I. Joe classified figures, and not just G.I. Joe figures, but Hasbro figures in general, like Marvel Legends as well, are becoming harder and harder to come around, even though they're still highly profited after. So I don't know why that's the case. It's not like they're losing a whole lot of money. It's just weird. But that would be my take on this line overall. So yeah.